Okay, we're looking at the first mimer the Rebbe said. As we know, only a Rebbe this says a mimer, and this is the mimer that officially announced the Rebbe as taking his position as the Rebbe. As we also know, this mimer is based on the previous Rebbe's mimer. Before the previous Rebbe passed away, he wasn't talking much, so he would take transcripts of old discourses, rewrite them, and have them published. His son-in-law, who would become the Rebbe later, was in charge of the publishing house, so that was part of his job, to prepare these Maimorim to be distributed. So the previous Rebbe, before he had passed, had asked and given to be published a discourse that would eventually be published in honor of what would become the day he passed away. So it became that discourse, which has 20 chapters, became the mimer associated with his passing.
But he's the one that put it together.
He's the one that put it together for his grandmother's yard site and his mother's yard site, for other occasions, which later became his own.
The Rebbe gave it over. It's like basically he says, "Okay, I'm here."
So there was a 20 chapter mimer from him, and then every year the Rebbe would deliver a mimer based on that booklet, that 20 chapter booklet. Every year doing another chapter.
Wasn't this originally said in 1923? That's what your father said?
Pei Gimel, yeah.
So the original Basi L'Gani.
It wasn't even called Basi L'Gani, it was called Vahiba Yatzim Mazeh. It was a different name, but it was the same mimer. Same mimer. It was reworked for the publishing. It was re-edited and rewritten for my publishing.
Did the Rebbe rewritten?
No, this one's written this one is delivered by the Rebbe in 1951. 1950, when the previous Rebbe passed away, the previous Rebbe took a discourse that he had delivered in 1923, reworked it and published it for 1950.
He reworked.
But in 1950 passed away. Now we're looking at 1951, where the Rebbe is delivering a discourse the first time as Rebbe, discussing that which his father-in-law had written and published for a year before 1950.
So he only
Clear?
changed the first
Technically,
word.
it was originally done in 1923.
Delivered verbally, but then published as a booklet in 1950 when he passed away.
Okay.
And then the next year, 1951, the Rebbe became officially assumed the leadership with this discourse, based on that
So
mimer.
word for word, you only changed the title?
I don't know.
Word for word after that?
I don't know. So the mimer begins like this. The story around this mimer is well known. Some part of it's taped. Anyway, so the mimer begins like this. Kaisev Chak Muchad Mor. My father-in-law, the Rebbe, writes that my Mara in his mimer, in his discourse, given in honor of the day of his passing, right? It became his passing. Yud Shvat, Hey Tov Shin Yud, Yud Shvat 1950. So this is 1951. He's talking about a discourse that his father-in-law delivered, or his father-in-law published a year earlier when he passed. And the mimer begins like this. Basi L'Gani Sikala quotes a verse in Shira Shirim in Song of Songs which reads, I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride. This whole Song of Songs is a metaphor, God speaking about his love for the Jewish people, and the metaphor is Chas and Akala, bride and groom. Bride, the groom being God, and the bride being the Jewish people. And therefore the verse says, Basi L'Gani, I came to my garden, Achaisi, to my sister, Kala, my bride. Now, the Isib Medrash Rabbah, the Midrash, known as Medrash Rabbah, comments Bimkaimoi right there on the verse in Shir HaShirim. This is significant also. The Medrash reads, Lagan Ein Ksiv Kan. The verse does not state, God says, I came to the garden. Elo Lagani, it says, I came to my garden. And the Midrash comments, Lagnuni. Gnuni is like, there are different types of gardens. And within, this is what I heard once from Rabbi Zarchi, that like when there's a big leisure garden in the middle, you have like a gazebo where you hang out. That's Gnuni. So it's like within the garden, that's the place where I like to be.
Best place.
Yeah, like my most intimate spot, my favorite spot within the garden. So God's returning back to his garden. And if the Medrash comments, the Makam Shaya Ikir B'Tchila, God is coming to the place where he was to begin with. Because he says my garden, not the garden, but my garden, which means that's where he was to begin with, and now he's coming back. And if the Medrash comments, the Ikir Shechina B'Tachtainim Haisa, because the primary presence of Hashem was in this physical world, and now the verse is saying, I came back to it. Ad Kan Lashonai, this ends the quote from the Medrash. Now comes the Rebbe's comment. Let's analyze this word, Ikar Shechina, the primary presence of Hashem. And the big question is, what does it mean, primary presence of Hashem? How many presences of Hashem are there? It should have just said, the Shechina was here, the presence of God was here. Why Ikar Shechina, the primary presence of God was here? How many presences of God are there? Primary makes it sound like there's a secondary. Right? That's what the Rebbe wants to analyze. What does this mean, the primary presence of Hashem? The explanation is a bit esoteric, but we'll try to keep it as simple as possible. Because there are some the Maimer, it's interesting. The Maimer is split goes back and forth between two realms, like much of Chassidus and like much of the Rebbe's teaching. Goes from the highest of highest, lofty, deep explanations and gets to practical, real-world, applicable stuff. And they're very much interconnected. And that's part of, as you'll see, as the Maimer develops, part of what the Rebbe's mission here is to take the deepest levels of Hashem's truth to make it available for all Jews. So in this Maimer that happens, the Rebbe talks about the deepest, loftiest levels and then goes to the practical, as you're going to see, even from paragraph to paragraph, switching between lofty, deep ideas about the essence of the divine and then switching to practical, real-world application. What do you have to do? Yeah, it's going to go back and forth like that. So this paragraph gets a little bit on the loftier side, then it's going to come back down to like the practical end, connecting them and then going back and forth like that. Okay, so we need to understand what is Ikar Shechina, the primary presence of Hashem. What else is there? So it says there, Peter Shechina, in defining the word Shechina, Mavayar Chakad Morazakin, the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, explains in Tanya, Shedikar Shechina, it's called Shechina, al Shem, coming from the term Sheichenes Mislabeshes, which means manifest and invest himself. So you have Hashem himself, as it were, and then Hashem chooses to manifest or to express himself in a certain place. That would be called Shechina.
Shechina is like more sleeping, no?
Sheikhin. That's Shochab or Chab. Sheikhin is like a neighbor, more like manifest.
What do you're thinking of Shina without a Chav?
No, sleep.
Oh, to lie down. Shliva, it's with a Vav, with a vase. Sheikh with a vase. Shechenes Mesabashet means to be manifest and invested. Meloshim v'shechanti b'soichim coming from the term. So to dwell within. Meloshim v'shechanti b'soichim coming from the term where the verse describes Hashem's presence in the Mishkan as God dwelled in them. God dwelt. We'll analyze this verse more later. But over here, he's just telling us that the word, proving to us that the word Shechina means Hashem as He invests Himself or manifests in a certain place. So what we have here is already that Shechina is a relative term. If Shechina means God as He's manifest, then the question is what level is manifest? And every level has its Shechina, as it were. Every level has itself, and then it has the way in which it speaks and invests and communicates to the next level. So that little part of it, which communicates to the next, would be called Shechina. So now that we have defined already that Shechina is a relative term, now we can say what's Ikar Shechina, the primary Shechina. Following? Now that we understand it's a relative term, because it means. No, Shechina is not a level. Shechina is a state of being, that it's invested somewhere. So what's invested there?
And what's this place to?
Or where is it being invested to? That's correct. What's being invested and into what? That's correct. So, the place is down in this physical world. The Medrash said that the Ikar Shechina, the primary Shechina of Hashem, was in this world. So we know it's manifest here. Right? Okay. So Shahu, this is Reishi says Galus Ar Ein Sof, the first time God manifests His infinite self. So there's God Himself. God doesn't need to do anything. Right? It doesn't even have to project energy. Right? We say that God has infinite amount of energy. Right? Here he uses the term. Chassidus uses the term Ar, light, but you can use the term energy. It's the same kind of idea. Ar and Chayas, they're often interchangeable, used together. So there's the essence of Hashem, God Himself, and then at one point He decided, you know what? We're going to have infinite amount of energy. The first time He does that, that's already a Shechina, because He's projected somewhere. Clear on that? Okay. Now, from the fact that the Alter Rebbe writes at the first time God reveals Himself and manifests an infinite, it's called Shechina.
That would be when.
Okay, when is an interesting term because it doesn't define in time, but in conceptual time. So that's going to kind of be the question. It says here the beginning of the manifestation of the infinite, which means as far back as you can go to find the beginning.
Well, whose beginning are we dealing with?
The essence of Hashem is being the beginning, not a temporal beginning, but conceptual beginning. In that
there can't be a beginning.
Okay, so I'll give you an example. When you say, for example, that 1 + 1 = 2, can't be 4, 2 + 2 = 4. Does it come before in time on the clock? Conceptually, though, 1 + 1 = 2 is a more primary thing. That's right. So when you say before or after or beginning, when you're talking about divine levels that are obviously that predate time, you mean conceptual time, not actual literal time. on a clock. You mean conceptually what level is more primary to the next one? Following somewhat? Okay. Okay, Sheresh is Galas from the fact that Rebbe writes at the beginning of Revelation, the beginning of God's manifestation, if even the infinite, is called Shechina. Moving Mizeh is understood that the idea of Shechina who Lamaila Matzilus Gamkin is even beyond the world of Atzilus. Very briefly, to explain what this means, Atzilus is the world of the divine. So when you say God is smart, wise, kind, judgment, when you say any of those things, you're referring to Atzilus. Because those are defined terms. God is wise, and God is kind, and God is strong, and God is this. You're giving a bunch of defined terms. That's generally the definition of a world. Definition of a world is that it has a bunch of attributes. So when you say God is fill in the blank, you're referring to Atzilus, this world of God's attributes. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that the first time God manifests attributes is called Shekhinah. But the first time God manifests infinite is considered the Shekhinah. Which means the Shekhinah could be even before God's attributes. It's the infinite energy even before it's defined by wise, kind, smart, strength. Following? Okay. So it means, but Rishis Orein Soif means before Atzilus, because Atzilus is already defined, it's already defined character traits. So it even goes beyond the energy that predates the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum is, very briefly, when there's infinite energy, you cannot have any world. Because worlds are defined by limitations, by characters, by strict rules and regulations. That's what makes a world, right? It's kind, here's kindness, here's wisdom, and here's strength, and they interact in such and such a fashion. When you have infinite energy, it's just infinite. So in order for the infinite divine to have a world that has particular characters that are finite, you have to create a vacuum in which the infinite is not there, and then you can put some energy into that space and make a bunch of worlds. Somewhat clear? This comes from Nardizal. A little bit clear? Sorry, somewhat clear?
You have to be familiar with these things.
To give you an illustration, when you have a water dam, right? And we have gushing water, and you want to get a small stream that's going to put the water into your cup, right? So even though the rushing waterfall is not infinite, it's also finite. It has a certain amount. The Niagara Falls is still finite. It's still measured by a certain amount of gallons that fall every day. If you want to fill up this cup, you couldn't put the cup under it; it would crush the cup, right? So you have to stop the water, theoretically, carve a little hole that will make a stream, and then put your cup there. And then you can fill up your cup with water from the Niagara Falls. But you have to stop all that rushing energy if you want to get that little bit of water into this cup. That, times infinity, is what God has to do to his infinite energy to create small little worlds. As vast as our world is, it's still defined. It's still a finite amount of energy. As vast as that energy, as big as this world is, it still has a certain dimension. So even the spiritual worlds have a dimension. It's wise, it's kind, it's strong, but those are dimensions that require a specific amount of energy. Clear? A little bit?
A little bit clear, but the confusion is spiritual worlds versus
Physical world. We're talking about any world. Any world has to have a definition, otherwise it's not a world. So even the loftiest of spiritual worlds, even the divine world, which is God's wise, God is kind, God is strong, is still a world that has very specific definitions. So it's not a tiny cup like this, but it's still defined, and therefore cannot have infinite energy. Then it wouldn't be wise and kind, it would just be infinite energy. So in order for there to be a world that has definitions of wise, kind, God has to first contract, has to make a space, make a vacuum within his infinite energy, and then create these worlds inside of them. Not clear?
yes. The only thing that's not clear is the adjective of the spiritual world to the world that we live in.
Yeah.
Physical.
The physical, yeah.
So
How do we relate to that?
how do we call them both worlds?
We call them both worlds because they both function at a certain system. They have system. They have certain characters that interact with each other. In our world, it's a bunch of chemicals, and up there, it's a bunch of spiritual energies. But they still have elements that interact with each other to create the functioning world, whether it's human beings, animals, or angels and souls. Okay. All to say that because the Alter Rebbe describes Shekhinah as the first time the infinite is manifest, that means we're talking about even before God, even the energy before the vacuum was made to make the worlds inside. We're talking about the first time infinite was manifest. Right? Because the first time God manifests is the infinite energy before it becomes a vacuum to create the finite.
If I understand correctly, that same Shekhinah,
Yeah.
is the Shekhinah that dwelled in the heavens.
Otazoi.
Otazoi, look at that. But that's quite a contraction.
It's the ultimate paradox, contradiction, which is going to be explained later in the Maimer. But yes, that's exactly where it's going. This primary Shekhinah, which is even before the first time God ever emerged as an infinite being, is what was here in this physical world and what we are charged with to bring back to this world. That's what the mitzvah does, as we'll learn soon in the Maimer. Okay. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? Yeah, okay, let's move a little forward. Let's move a little forward. I'd like to get to at least the second paragraph here, okay. As the Rebbe writes, the second Chabad Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe writes that relative to the infinite divine energy that is beyond the vacuum that we created, beyond the tzimtzum, beyond this contraction that God made to create the finite, and then there's the small little bit of finite energy that comes into that vacuum, that little small little bit of energy is called Shekhinah, relative to the infinite, because the infinite one now manifests into the finite space. If the term Shekhinah means manifest and investure, then the infinite one was beyond the worlds, and then there's a little bit of energy that was invested into the finite worlds. That little bit of energy is called Shekhinah, relative to the infinite that supersedes the vacuum.
Primary.
Somewhat clear? Not primary yet, but relative to that.
What's the mental Rebbe saying?
Kavachot, the kav means that the finite energy that came into the empty space, into the vacuum, is considered Shekhinah relative to the infinite energy that precedes the vacuum. It's like that little bit of water that's coming through the hole that we created in the dam of Niagara Falls. So that little bit is the water here that's manifest here. So that's considered Shekhinah. Which means
even for Alter Rebbe,
so that's correct. It's different relative Shekhinahs. Because the word Shekhinah again means manifest, so it's relative to what?
So the last Rebbe is going to bring it down, then it's down here too.
That's it. The Gamba is that Mashamalchat Tatzilis. That's right, that's correct. Because the idea of Shekhinah, in each sphere, in each level, Shekhinah is relative to its place. The Gabe Atzilus, when you're talking about the divine world, the last level of the divine world meaning not the infinite, but the divine world, God's kind, God's wise, God's smart, God's judging, all that. The Shekhinah there is the lowest level, which projects into the next world, otherwise known as God's speech. There's God's wisdom. Let's just use me as an example, or a human being. I have the idea of this mimer here in my mind, right? But then my brain has a process by which it chooses words to say to you about the idea, right? Or I can do the same thing in my feelings. I have a bunch of feelings, and then my brain has a process of choosing words to share that feeling with you. Those words are Shekhinah relative to my feeling and idea. It's the bottom of my internal world. I have an internal world of ideas and feelings, and the bottom of the line is my speech, which communicates to the next world, you. And then you take that Shekhinah that I just gave you, this idea, think about it in your own mind, it creates its own world, and then you can speak to the next person. That's Shekhinah being relative to you. Following?
This is still a mental I've been doing this a while.
Yeah.
This is the absolute first time that it's being rejected, excuse the pun, this way. Never thought of it. I'm just saying, as far as Shekhinah was concerned, that was one entity.
Right. So now that's right. This is it's a big chiddush of this mimer. This idea that there's a relative Shekhinah. Well, it's not exactly, but the way he does it here is relative. Okay, so therefore, the level of Malchus, which is the level of divine speech, is the Shekhinah relative to the divine world of intelligence, of emotion, etc. The Gamba Zeh, so that we have identified three different Shekhinahs so far. The Shekhinah. No, it's a different one. So there's going to be later. There's going to be some things that overlap. Okay, so we so far identified three different levels of Shekhinah. One level of Shekhinah is relative to the divine world. Malchus of Atzilus, the speech of the divine world. Then we did the finite energy relative to the infinite energy that precedes the vacuum. That's the higher level of Shekhinah. And then even higher than that is just the fact that God even projected an infinite is a Shekhinah relative to God's essence. Following, so far, 3 levels of Shekhinah relative.
But the essence, it can't have a Shekhinah, that's a projection.
He chose to project.
Right away, because that level gives no projection.
That's right, but it chose to project, and therefore it's
I
Shekhinah.
didn't understand that, maybe just but you said in Silas there's...
Malchus, God's speech.
But in the Silas there is no good, bad, whatever.
No, but there's kind, wise.
That's what I was trying to say. How could there be kind?
Atzilus has that. Atzilus is the finite world of the divine. It's the finite world of the divine.
Atzilus is the finite world of the divine.
Yes, it's an absolute unity with God and all kinds of lofty explanations, but it's still a finite
I
world.
thought it was essence, pure essence, nothing else.
Atzilus is one with the but it's still a finite world. It's after the Kav, it's inside the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum happens before
Atzilus
Atzilus.
is in there because it's one of the 4.
It's the first of the 4 worlds, so it's the first world inside the vacuum. Not even because there's Ak, but that's the first world of the inside. That's right. Somewhat clear? Somewhat clear? Just all the deep explanations you have to understand to go forward in the Maimon. The basic idea here is that every level, we identified 3 of them, but every level, whenever that level projects to speak and to create the next level, that's called Shekhinah. And we identified 3 of those, from the divine world into created worlds, and then from the infinite to the finite, and then from God to the infinite himself, to the infinite. From God himself to the infinite. Clear somewhat? Okay. The Gamba is that even the fact that Malchus of Atzilus, this last level of the divine world Atzilus, divine communication of that lower world, of that divine world, is called Shekhinah, which we just said because it projects to the next world to create it. The Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe explains, it's only once it's already been removed from Atzilus to create the next world. So using the example of speech, if you want, you could split hairs here and you could say, I have an idea in my head, I have feelings in my head. That's a whole world. And then the last of that world is my communication to you. Now within that communication there's 2 levels. There's a second before I speak, my brain thinks the words, and then there's the actual communication of the words. Both of those are called Malchus, because they're both the word that I'm going to communicate to you. So there's Malchus before I project, and there's Malchus after I project.
After you project.
That's right, because both of them are words that are not really for me, they're words for you. But it's the words before it left me, and then those words that came out of me. So it says Tzemach Tzedek. Yes, but it's not thought for its own sake. It's thought for how am I going to communicate to you. For speech, it's correct. That's Malchus within my world. And then when I actually speak, it's Malchus projecting into your world. So says the Tzemach Tzedek that when does Malchus become Shekhinah? When it actually projects into the next world, not before. Clear? Okay. But when Malchus still is in Atzilus, when it's still in the world divine, it's one with the world of before. Im spheres Atzilus. You can't call it Shekhinah because Shekhinah means projection to the next world, and therefore only once it's removed from Atzilus and invested into the next world to communicate there, then it becomes Shekhinah. Nevertheless, this does not contradict that which the second Chabad Rebbe said, that the finite energy that came from the infinite is called Shekhinah. Why? Because as we just finished saying, it's a relative term. Whenever our sages use the term Shekhinah, they mean Malchus of Atzilus, they mean divine communication. So whenever you open the Gemara and it says Shekhinah, or the Medrash it says Shekhinah, it's talking about divine communication from the world of Atzilus, Malchus of Atzilus, the divine world communicating to some level. Whenever the Gemara says Shekhinah. Unless they give a caveat, which the Medrash here does, because it says Ikir Shekhinah. Clear? This is what we're going to here. And even that, even Malchus of Atzilus, as we said before, only becomes Shekhinah when it projects into the next world. But this Malchus, before it gets projected, but in the source of where Shekhinah really is, the original Shekhinah, even relative to the infinite, then the finite energy that's injected into the vacuum is called Shekhinah relative to the infinite before the vacuum. Somewhat clear? Okay. One of the reasons why this first finite divine energy that's injected into the vacuum is called Shekhinah, relative to the infinite prior to the vacuum. The fourth Chabad Rebbe writes, I don't know if you've noticed, but he quoted so far in order. First Chabad Rebbe, second Chabad Rebbe, third Chabad Rebbe, now he's quoting the fourth. At the end of the day, why is it that God projected anything to begin with from the top? Why did God do anything? At the end of the, He chose to, but for what purpose? To what end?
So that he can bring it down there and make it elevate.
So it can create a Jew, right? Which means even the loftiest levels of the divine, really at the end of the day, are for Shekhinah investment in this world, into the Jew. And therefore, even the loftiest level, even the relative Shekhinah, the highest level, at the end of the day, still takes the term Shekhinah, because at the end of the day, what's its objective? To finally make it down through all of these contractions and all of these worlds, till it makes it down to this physical world where a Yid can do a mitzvah. So again, getting back to this point, we're connecting the loftiest level to the lowest level. Right from the top, from the very, very highest point, from Iker Shekhinah, the primary, why did God do any of this whole project? The point was that it could eventually create a Jew that can do a mitzvah down here.
But that goes against its Tzadik's because he also said the Malchus Atzilus is only when it goes out of the first one. It's not.
Good question. Good question. Very good question. I don't know the answer. It's a good question. I have to think about it. I have to think about that. That's a very good question. Okay, L'mayla Yoser, now going higher. The first time we have Shekhinah, which is prior to the vacuum, the infinite light, the infinite energy that has prior to the vacuum, in which there's going to be finite. The sixth Chabad Rebbe, the fifth Chabad Rebbe explains the way in which God projects that there should be infinite light even prior to the vacuum. Is also called Shekhinah, because God chose to project. So once you're talking about project, it's also Shekhinah already, even though it's a higher level. Okay, now it gets a little bit even more subtle, and I'm going to try to explain best I can. But if we don't fully grasp it, don't beat yourself up, because it's a very, very difficult. Till now it's difficult, and this next paragraph is going to be even more difficult to follow. Still something that many, including myself, have to struggle to understand. Okay. It's just a fair warning. As I mentioned before, it gets from lofty levels to practical levels. The next paragraph is going to get much more practical and fist pounding on the table style. The next chapter. So we're going to push through to get to that. Okay, so Shnefnei Tzimtzum, prior the infinite divine energy prior to the vacuum, Yesh Magim Madreges can be divided into three categories: Etzem Ha'or, V'Hispashtus Ha'or, the essence of light, and then the projection of light. I'll give an example in a moment. Ubistashus are Beis Madreges, and within the expansion of light there are two levels. Gilui Kamoshul Atzmai, the way this revelation is for itself, which is the root of the transcendent divine light. Translating literally, I'll explain in a minute. Then there is the infinite divine light as it projects for himself for the purpose of later creating a world, which is the root for the imminent, immersive divine energy. This is called Shekhinah. Okay, so to explain what this is, you have, let's say atomic energy, right? You have the essential energy, which is tiny, really, and then let's just use atomic energy to create electricity and light bulbs, right? Then you have the infinite potential that this atomic energy has. We're all talking potential here now, and then you have within that atomic infinite potential that the atom has, there's also the potential to give energy to one tiny light bulb. It also has that too. So within the atomic energy, you have really three levels. The essence of the atom itself, which holds all the potential. Then you have its infinite explosive potential, and then you have its potential to create a finite tiny little sliver of energy that's going to charge the light bulb in the building. Somewhat clear? When you're talking about the divine, you can think of it this way: there is the essential potential that God has for energy, That's the essence of the the essence of the light. Then there is the divine expands with infinite energy. The atom explodes. And then you have the divine imagines to itself, as it were, how it's going to create tiny little worlds. And that is the potential within the infinite to give off, what's the word I'm looking for? To emanate a finite amount of energy to create a finite small little world. Clear? This is all within the divine infinite light, meaning this is all within the potential of the atom. It's all within the potential of the infinite. But the potential of the infinite has its essential potential, the explosion of infinite energy, and then it has the potential for a small amount of energy. It's going to become a small little world.
That's the normal.
That's Shekhinah. That's the first Shekhinah. It's the original infinite potential to manifest in a smaller way, which becomes Mamale later. Somewhat clear? Okay. Even though we're talking prior to the vacuum, so we're all talking about infinite potential, the and because it's prior to the vacuum, there cannot be worlds there. Worlds is only created when there's a vacuum in the infinite, right? We said that before, that the infinite itself you can't have finite worlds coming from the infinite, there has to be a vacuum. Which is why there had to be the contraction in this vacuum. And this contraction wasn't just that we diminish the energy, but we actually have to remove the energy so that it actually creates a vacuum. Nevertheless, because what we're talking about here is a potential for finite amount of energy, therefore we can call it Shekhinah. Even though it's only potential, and even though there is no worlds there, and worlds can't even exist there because it's infinite still. But because what we're referring to here is that sliver of potential that this infinite light has for a finite world, therefore we're calling it Shekhinah. Because that is, at least conceptually speaking, God's investing itself into something. Even if it's only in a conceptual, potential manner.
Didn't we just say 4 or 5 minutes ago
Yeah.
that Shekhinah has to be projected?
That's right. So this is the first potential projection into finite.
It hasn't happened yet.
So,
Okay, I mean, it's an obvious
yeah, but there is no potential that isn't a reality for God, right? So even if it doesn't exist in the reality, but in potential it exists. It's not like my potential, which is latent.
Okay,
Then
so you should call it potential Shekhinah. Like
relative to that level, it is Shekhinah.
the gas in the car is potentially going to fuel.
No, let's put it this way: the very fact that God conceptualizes a finite world is already itself God contracting Himself, even though there isn't a finite world yet. But the very fact that He's even imagining a finite world is a projection, is a contraction, is a limitation on Him. In fact, He's even imagining there's going to be a finite little world that has finite characters, and that's Shekhinah. God imagining a finite world, if you can think of it that way.
I'll have to accept that.
It's very subtle. It's very difficult. Okay, we're going to move to the next paragraph. I really want to do the next paragraph. Okay, and this is the meaning of the Medrash, which says that the primary presence of Hashem was here in this physical world. That there was the revelation of the divine presence in this physical world at the beginning of creation. Is not the Shekhinah relative to Atzilus, because that's ordinary Shekhinah. If the Medrash would have said Shekhinah without any caveats, then we would say it's considered Malchus of Atzilus. Hainu Malchus. And it's not even the Shekhinah as it is relative to the infinite, which would be the finite energy injected into the vacuum. We're talking about the very primary, and therefore the deepest level of Shekhinah was here in this physical world. Because the word, as we just finished saying, the word Shekhinah is a relative term to projection, and therefore the Medrash doesn't say Shekhinah Stam. It doesn't just say Shekhinah. It says Ikar Shekhinah. So if we have to go to the loftiest level of divine projection and say, where's your Shekhinah? That's what was here. Sorry? So that's correct. That means the divine, infinite energy, the first time God conceptualized, let there be a world, that energy was in this physical world.
But prior to this physical world being created,
Yeah. It was.
you have to conceptualize this world.
That's right. And then when He created the world, what energy was there? The energy that's there is the original conceptualization, because that's what He wanted to begin with. That's what He first thought about. Okay.
You have to contract His energy.
So He did. That's correct. That's right. So the top always is at the bottom. It's going to be a theme of this mimer, right? Because the very essence of Hashem, the whole project to begin with was the physical.
It has to still remain separate and apart.
That's going to become a theme of this mimer. That this physical world, given the fact that it's not obviously God, is what God first thought of to begin with. When he began this whole project called creating worlds, spiritual worlds, the end objective was that there should be a world where godliness is not obvious. Right? Which means, what was the first thought? The deepest truth of Hashem was to begin with a place where it's not going to be obvious. And that's Iker Shechina. Clear? Somewhat? Okay. We're going to move to the next paragraph and we'll kind of reconfigure ourselves.
Sorry, just to...
Yeah. No, I'm listening. Go ahead.
Just on what you just said. So, when God created this world, He created it that we don't see godliness.
It's correct.
That it's concealed.
Well, to begin with, He was revealed. He was obvious. But now it's...
His intention when He created this world...
It's a place where He's not obvious and we can discover Him.
So that godliness is not
obvious.
And
we have to go discover it and reveal it. Right? So because that was the whole purpose to begin with, that means the first concept, the first and most primary thought, as it were, of God projecting Himself, the first Shekhinah was what? Let there be a physical world. So the physical world is what taps to the original Iker primary Shekhinah.
But before He thought, let there be a physical world,
there's nothing, it's just God Himself.
Correct, but when he's thinking of creating this physical world, He already had in mind that there'll be no godliness.
That's what emerges from the Maimer as we go on, yeah. Okay, so it explains like this. Because as the energy invests itself into various different spiritual worlds, it goes in a certain structure. Each world is progressively less obviously godly than the next. The higher you go, the closer you get to God, the more obvious godliness is. And as you get lower in the worlds, divine light, divine energy is less obvious. This is true of the way in which the divine energy evolves or devolves to slowly, through a system of infinite worlds, slowly diminish its own energy so it's not obvious. And what makes a world higher or lower is to what degree is godliness obvious in that state, being our world being lowest where it's not obvious. Now even though in our physical world there was the primary Shekhinah at the beginning of creation, nonetheless it wasn't as obvious as it was in the higher world, because otherwise it wouldn't be down here, it would be a higher world. The definition of a higher world is that godliness is more obvious. So even as God was here in this physical world, it means that other higher worlds had godliness even more.
Adam's first hour was...
Sorry?
Adam's first hour before he did this in there? Before the Chet.
Atzilus is still higher than him. Right?
But he had some level of it.
Something like that. Like the Pasuk says, God uses his right hand to make the heavens and the left hand to make the earth, as if to say the left hand, earth, is lower. And therefore what we mean when we say that the divine presence was here, we mean the primary Shekhinah, which is beyond the whole system of worlds, the essence of God Himself, as we'll learn about later in the Maimer. Okay. Summary of this whole thing is that when we say, as we're going to go further on the Maimer, that our purpose here is to bring the divine presence into this world, we mean the very essence of God Himself. That was the point of this whole paragraph. To prove from the use of the Medrash, which says Iker Shekhinah, the primary Shekhinah, to say that it's not just the regular Shekhinah, it's the primary Shekhinah. And if we explain that the Shekhinah is a relative term, and if when we say primary, we mean the very highest and loftiest. That's the whole point of this first paragraph. But explaining it on different levels, that little sentence was clear, then we can go forward.
But what you're saying, if the Iker Shekhinah is here, then it's higher than what other was.
Right, that's why that last line is not so clear, but it seems this is my understanding of this. The Rebbe is saying therefore you must say that Iker Shekhinah is that which is beyond the worlds. And therefore, in the system of worlds, you're right, Atzilus is higher than this physical world. But when you're talking about Iker Shekhinah, which is beyond this world, it's talking beyond, even beyond Atzilus. So in terms of the system of worlds, the physical world was lower. But in terms of the primary Shekhinah, it was here in this physical world, because the primary Shekhinah is beyond the system of worlds, because it goes to before the Tzimtzum. That's what it seems like you're trying to say. I'm not 100% clear on it, and I'm telling you, people struggle with this, but this is how I understand it. Okay. Now we're going to come to the more practical world. Okay, we'll try to push as far as we can here. The The fact that we said that the primary presence of Hashem was here in the physical world before by Medrash, it's understood from the Medrash that we quoted earlier from the Shir Hashirim that when the Medrash says that the primary presence of Hashem was invested in the nether worlds, it's referring to our physical world. As the Medrash goes on to say that at the beginning of creation, indeed God's presence was in this world, but through the sin of the tree of knowledge, the first thing is the presence of Hashem was removed from this world and was pushed up, as it were, to the heaven, to the spiritual plane. And the Medrash there lists 7 generations of people who sinned, and each one of the generations of sinners, they pushed the presence of Hashem farther and farther and farther away from this world. And then through 7 tzaddikim, starting with Avraham Avinu, last one being Moshe Rabbeinu, who brought the Torah al Har Sinai to the physical world, then Basi L'Gani, God returns to his garden. That's the Medrash. The presence of Hashem was in this physical world. Through sins, it was moved away, and then through tzaddikim, it was brought back, until finally, by Matan Torah, God says, I'm back to my garden.
Are we talking about the primary?
Yes. You're still stuck on that primary. Okay, leave it aside for a second. It might become clear later when he makes a difference between Atzmas and
It's already
Giluyim.
down here so low then.
It's Atzmas versus Giluyim. In Giluyim, you're right, Atzilus is higher. But Atzmas was here. That's the bottom line, what emerges. But it's going to become more clear later. Sorry?
Adam was also in the world.
That's right. So in terms of Giluyim, he was lower than Atzilus. But in terms of accessing the essence of Hashem, the Atzmos, he had Atzmos, as opposed to Atzilus, because that was the original objective. But in other words, let's put it this way. Hashem's objective was that there should be a place where a physical world, and in the physical world they should serve him. So as soon as Adam and sinned, so the primary purpose for which this world was created was just rejected. And every time another sin happens, that primary purpose was rejected. So the primary purpose / the primary essence of Hashem's desire being invested in this physical world, that there should be people who behave, was being rejected once, twice, 3 times, 7 times. And then slowly, other generations brought that back by kind of saying to Hashem, look, the reason why you created this whole world was so you have people who listen to you. We're doing it now.
So
and therefore that primary original idea comes back, as it were, to this world, until finally God comes at Mount Sinai, here's a Jew who's going to Torah mitzvahs.
we say that Adam wasn't the real world, at that time wasn't the real world.
Yeah, okay, let's go forward from that. Even though the Medrash there lists 7 generations of sins that remove the presence of Hashem from this physical world, the primary you're removing is the first one. Because once you're in level 2 of the heavens, or level 3 or level 5, it doesn't really matter, because you're not on this earth anymore. Right, so the primary issue is that you removed it from the physical world. That was the purpose. And the fact that there was a sin later that removed it from the 2nd heaven to the 3rd heaven, and the 3rd heaven to the 4th heaven, okay. But the main problem here is you removed it from the physical world, because that was the point. Right, clear? And just like it is when it comes to sin, the primary of the 7 sins was the sin of the tree of knowledge, the first sin of Adam Adam, because through the sin of the tree of knowledge, and that's what gave room and gave rise for the notion of sin to begin with coming later. So it's the first and worst one. And the sin of the tree of knowledge was the cause for the sin of the next generation of the brothers of Cain and then later Enosh and others in the other generations. So the sin of Adam was the most primary, worst of them, because it caused the other sins to happen. The same thing is true of the effect. The fact that we remove the presence of Hashem through sin. The primary issue here is that you remove it from the physical world. The same way we just finished saying that the primary objective of God's presence of Hashem, the Shekhinah, was primarily for this physical world, but is for this physical world. The same thing is true in the reverse. The primary removing of God from this world, is the fact that it left this world.
First level.
That happened to the sin of knowledge. Which removed the presence of Hashem from the earth to the heaven. That's the reason why when the previous Rebbe's Maimer discourse quotes the Medrash, he quotes the sin of the tree of knowledge, and independently the other are 6. Why? Because the other 6 sins that come later of Cain and Enosh and the later ones, all they did was they removed the presence of Hashem from one spiritual world to another spiritual world. So instead of it being 1 spiritual world away from our world, it's 2 spiritual worlds away from our world, or 3 spiritual worlds away from our world. But that's secondary to the fact that it's not here. Right? When you're talking about the sin of the tree of knowledge, where it removed it from this physical world to begin with. Besides the fact that it removed it from this world, besides the fact that it's most important to us, because we live in the physical world, this is the primary problem, is removing it from the physical world. All to say that the primary is bringing it back to the physical world. So if the primary is number one in terms of sin, because that's the one who removed it away from the world, then the primary in terms of doing mitzvahs is number 7, which brings it back to the physical world. That's where he's going. Are we clear on this? Yeah? This part of the mimer is amazing. Okay, the previous Rebbe continues. After describing the sin, after describing the fact that the primary presence of Hashem was in this physical world, and then describing that there were 7 generations of sin that pushed the presence of Hashem away from this world. And we just finished saying that the first and most egregious of those is Adam, who pushed it away from our physical world. Now let's go to the reverse, when the presence of Hashem comes back to the world. The previous discourse continues, quoting from the Medrash. And then 7 righteous men came, starting with Avram Avinu, and they slowly brought the presence of Hashem back to this world. By behaving the way Hashem wants, they kind of reproved for Hashem that this project called creation is worth it. And therefore his original idea of making a world where people are going to serve him is slowly coming back to reality, because people are listening and people are actually observing God's desire. Starting with Avram merited Levav. He brought the presence of Hashem from the 7th heaven to the 6th heaven, closer to our world. And the Alter Rebbe, the previous Rebbe in the discourse doesn't go through the whole length of the Medrash, which lists all 7 generations. He skips and says, and goes right to the 7th generation, Ad ki Moshe, until it gets to Moshe Shua Shvi, which is the 7th generation, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Levi, Kahas, Amram, Moshe. 7 generations from Avram to Moshe. Right? And he quotes a Medrash elsewhere, which says that all 7th are precious. Medrash doesn't explain why, just says it's a fact. All 7th are precious. Moshe Rabbeinu brought the presence of Hashem down to this world. When? At the giving of the Torah. He brought Hashem back to this physical world by giving us physical mitzvahs that we can do.
Levi's son.
Levi's son.
And then Amram.
That's right. Levi, Kahas, Amram, Moshe. So in the same way that the removal of the presence of Hashem was primarily the person who pushed it away from the world, so therefore the primary returning of the Shekhinah is the one who brings it back to the physical world, namely Moshe Rabbeinu, the 7th generation from Avraham. The primary bringing back of Hashem's presence is Moshe. Because Moshe was the one who actually brought it to the physical world in Torah and mitzvahs. The same way it is that when it comes to the removing of God's presence, from below to above, the most egregious to them is the first one, which removed it from the physical world. The same thing is true of the bringing the back of the presence of Hashem from above to below. The primary one is the one who brings it back to the physical world. Besides the fact that it's most important to us because we live in the physical world, so the fact that Avram Avinu brought the presence of Hashem from the 7th to the 6th world doesn't really mean much to us. But the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu brought it to the physical world and gave you a physical mitzvah, that's important to me. But more than that, that's the primary purpose, because that was the whole purpose to begin with. The presence of Hashem was in the physical world. So not just from my perspective, it's most important that the presence of Hashem is in the physical world, but from God's perspective, it's the most important. That's what He always wanted. Clear? This happens to Moshe. Now, here comes an amazing thing. And then we're going to conclude at the end of this paragraph, then this next page. Which is going to move a little quicker than the last page, I hope. Now the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was the one to bring the presence of Hashem back to the physical world, there says the previous Rebbe in parentheses, quoting from another Medrash, all 7th are precious. Now, says the Rebbe, from the term that our sages said in the other Medrash, not the Medrash, the primary Medrash which describes the presence of Hashem going up and down. It's another Medrash which says that all the 7th are precious. All 7th are precious. The Medrash does not say kol hachavin shvin. It doesn't say all those who are precious are 7th. If the Medrash were to say all those who are precious are 7th, then that would mean, well, why are you precious? Because you're smarter? Okay, we're going to put you 7th in the line. That means your value is something you've given me, and as a result, I'm going to put you in 7. But the Medrash doesn't say that. The Medrash says all who are 7th are precious, which means if by the luck of the draw you became 7th, you're precious. Nothing to do with your virtue. Clear on this point? So muchach, it's clear. The primary value here is not that he did anything, but because he's number 7. And therefore, because he is 7th, that's why he's precious. Simply because he's 7. This means to say that the preciousness is not because of some choice that he made, or something he wanted, or something he did.
No choice.
By the very fact that he's 7th. You have to think of the context here. The Rebbe is becoming the 7th Rebbe now.
No choice.
Told you.
The Rebbe is becoming the 7th Rebbe now from the Alter Rebbe, and he's saying that being number 7, not because the Rebbe, not because I chose anything, not because I wanted anything, because I did anything.
7.
But you're 7th, and because you're 7th, this is your task. Not because you deserve anything, but because it's what Hashem wanted. It's an amazing thing, and we're going to see later. The Rebbe talks about it in terms of Chassidim now. Strong words. Shezeh b'mitzvah told them this comes from birth. You were born in 7. Nonetheless, even though you didn't do anything to earn it, anybody who's 7th, you're precious. Even though you were born that way, you didn't do anything. Therefore, and that's why Moshe was the one who merited to get the Torah for the Torah to be given to him, simply because he was 7th. Now, my father-in-law once explained, my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, but America, when he first arrived in America in 1940, or maybe it was the first time he came to America. No, I think it's 1940. Yeah. When you say that the 7th is precious, Nicker Milas Harishin, you can see the virtue of the first one. Why? You're only 7th. Who Shvi Relation is that you're 7th number 1. If there's no number 1 on the line, you're not number 7th. So when you look at number 7 and you say the 7th is most primary, then what you're really pointing to is that number 1 was so special that he made a 7th. And therefore we have to look at the virtue of the way the number 1 behaved, and that becomes the model for number 7. Meaning to say, look at the way Avraham Avinu behaved, and that's going to become the model for how Moshe Rabbeinu behaves. And that's going to become the model for how we behave in the 7th generation, in the Rebbe's generation, the 7th generation of Chabad. Clear? Now let's see, this is beautiful. The previous Rebbe explained, then, when he first came to America and explaining this, the virtue of the first of these 7 tzaddikim, which is Avraham Avinu. Who earned his place in his service, right? The 7th didn't earn his place. He's number 7th, he's precious, fine. But Avraham number 1 did have to earn his place. He worked. And his work included self-sacrifice. Quite literally, he almost died once, and he gave up his son's life. Avraham Avinu had Mesiras Nefesh for Hashem, right? Was willing to give up his life. Then he adds more. Self-sacrifice, not enough. And he adds another element. Even though the Rebbe says that at that time the previous Rebbe didn't have to say it. What he was trying to say in his talk, he didn't have to make this following point, but he did. That not only did Avraham Avinu have self-sacrifice, but there's another element, and this is amazing, and mamish defines the way the Rebbe led the way the Rebbe's leadership is, and the way he charged Chassidim to live. These 3 lines. The manner of Avraham Avinu's self-sacrifice was in such a way they never looked for it. Never wanted to be a hero. He didn't look out and say, when can I prove how amazing I am that I'll give up my life for God?
Like Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah. This is the defining distinction between the self-sacrifice of Avraham Avinu and the self-sacrifice of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva died at the hands of the Romans, who peeled his face with hot iron rods. And the Gemara tells us that when he was doing that, he was saying Shema. And his students were near him, and they said, Rabbi Akiva, so much so, you're being tortured to death and you're saying Shema? So he told the students, I'm happy now, I'm content right now. Because my entire life, I was waiting for the moment that I can give up my life for God. Now I'm finally getting it. Which means, the Rebbe says, the self-sacrifice of Rabbi Akiva, he was looking for self-sacrifice. He was looking to be a hero. This is a quote from that Gemara I just told you. He says, when is the opportunity going to come to my hands? And I'll do it. I want to die for God. When it comes to Avraham, the self-sacrifice of Avraham was nonchalant. Not because he looked for it, because it happened. Avraham knew, I have a job. What's my job? The verse says, call out to God. And Al tikra vayikra, the Gemara says, Al tikra vayikra, don't say call out to God, and vayakri, make other people call out to God. As yenazal or shayin, that the other Jew should call out to God. So Avram Avinu knew, what's my job? To make other people recognize God. That's my job. And if it so happens to be that in order to get my job done, I have to lose my life, I'll do that too. He wasn't looking for the opportunity to be a hero. He wasn't looking for the opportunity to die for Hashem. He knew his job. I have to go spread Yiddishkeit. If it so happens that I need to die for it, fine, so be it. It's an amazing frame of mind. The call, and Avram Avinu's self-sacrifice and dedication to the cause, to the point that if it happened to mean self-sacrifice, so be it, was so amazing. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was merited to be the one to bring the Shekhinah to the physical world through Torah is because he was the seventh. And seventh are precious. Seventh to who? He's seventh to the first one, to Avram. So Avram's mode of service of Hashem, where he said, I have a job, and if it means I need to give up everything, so I'll give up everything. That's what led to Moshe being the seventh one to bring the Shekhinah to the physical world. And therefore that becomes our modus operandi. Hashem tells Moshe, you can never get to the level of Avram Avinu. That's what Hashem says. Nonetheless, now even though this virtue of the seventh is not because he earned it or did anything or choose anything, he didn't choose to be the seventh. It happened automatically by birth. Nonetheless, there's no limits to say, oh, being seventh, that's too high for me, I can't do it. Special Jews, they can be the seventh. But rather, as it says in the Tanat of Elul, certain medrash, and it's quoted in Chassidus, Shekol Yisrael, every Jew, even a slave or even a maidservant, can get to the point of the presence of Hashem to reside in him. And every single Jew is obligated to say, when will my actions reach to the actions of my forefathers, of Mitzvah Yaakov. So on the one hand, you didn't choose to be seventh. On number two, you can't opt out. Can't opt out. It's such an amazing thing. Rebbe basically telling you automatic, and therefore he's saying, don't think because it's such a lofty level. Okay, well, I was born in it, but I can't do anything about it because it's too lofty. He's saying, no, that's not how it works. It happens to you automatically, and you can still do it, and you have to do it, even though it's such a lofty thing. Nevertheless, don't fool yourself. Don't try to stand. No, on the one hand, Moshe Rabbeinu is told, don't be like Avram Avinu. On the other hand, we're just told that you should be. So he's saying it's like this. You have to know your mission is, you were born in the seventh generation, your mission is to bring the presence of Hashem and to make other Jews teach other Jews to serve Hashem. Without looking for heroism, without looking for any sacrifice, do it because you have to. And if you have to give up everything, so give up also. Whatever it takes, you'll do it because you have a job to do. At the same time, don't convince yourself in thinking that you're Avram Avinu. Not Avram Avinu, but you're going with that kind of power, that attitude, even though you're not Avram Avinu. Okay? And if we remember, what makes you virtuous is number 7. That you're seventh, number 1, and number 1 did a lot of the work. Avram Avinu did the work. That you, as number 7, can accomplish the mission of the first one, which is Al Tikra Vayikra El Vayakri. Don't say I'm going to call out to Hashem, but make other people call out to Hashem. And the Rebbe said, when the Rebbe said the Maimer verbally, he actually added, and he said, and the Rebbe started crying. That if you want to truly call out to Hashem, you want to have a relationship to Hashem, you need to make somebody else call out to Hashem. Your relationship to Hashem is dependent on you making somebody else connect to Hashem. And try it. Guaranteed, if you take your lulav and esrog and you shake it with somebody else, I guarantee your sukkahs will not be the same sukkahs. Whatever you thought you enjoyed about sukkahs is not going to be anything compared to what the geschmack and the joy you get out of sukkahs when you make another juice shekel of an esek. Guaranteed. Try it and you'll see. Same thing with tefillin. When you put a tefillin with another Jew, the connection you're going to feel to Hashem will be greater than any time you've ever put on tefillin yourself. Fact. Tested and proven. Try it. You'll see. Try it. Try it and test it. You want Vayikra, you want to have a relationship with Hashem, Vayakri, make somebody else reach out to Hashem. When Rebbe said this, Rebbe was crying. So now we finish, concluding. This is the preciousness of the seventh generation. He brings the presence of Hashem back to this world. Moreover, he brings the primary, deepest level of Hashem. He brings it to the physical world. And Rebbe concludes this paragraph like this. And this is demanded of each and every one of us in the seventh generation. This is the first time. This Rebbe is announcing himself as the seventh Chabad Rebbe. This is what's demanded of every single one of us in the seventh generation. All seventh are precious. Even though the fact that we are here is not because we chose it. Rebbe cried here also a lot. Not because of our work, not because we earned it. And in many respects, the fact that we're in the seventh generation is we don't want it in some respects. What's the Rebbe talking about? This is after a year of the Rebbe, of people telling the Rebbe they wanted to become Rebbe, and the Rebbe kept on saying, I don't want to. And here in the Maimer, when the Rebbe announces himself, as the Rebbe says, it's not my choice, not because I earned it, and in some respects, it's not according to my desire. Unless, Hashem said, you're seventh, you're chosen, you got to do it. That's right. We stand at the heels of redemption, at the end of the heels of redemption. And our job, to finally bring the presence of Hashem back to this world. Not just the presence of Hashem, but the primary presence of Hashem. But and dafkin to the physical world. All to say, it never began, right from the beginning. All the Mivtzayim and everything they ever did, and Shlichus, all of it. It's all rooted in this idea. The notwithstanding what they ever thought of, it's unbelievable. Notwithstanding what they ever thought of himself or didn't think of himself, he understood as a mission he's going to get it done. And that's what he wants from us. To think of ourselves the same way. Am I worthy? Am I not worthy? Am I capable? Am I not capable? Or in the reverse, I want to go out and prove myself and be a hero. All that stuff, take yourself out of the equation. Number one, you're precious, but not because you did anything, because you were chosen. And because you were chosen to be that precious seventh, get the job done. Not because you want it. Sorry? To bring the presence of Hashem in this way to every single corner of the earth. This is never took it to a whole new level. 5,000 shluchim all over the world, and whole community here of shluchim. Talking about us, not shluchim, people have the official badge and job. But this idea of taking responsibility for Yiddishkeit, I'll just conclude with this. Every Rebbe had the challenge that the world offered, and each Rebbe had to define his leadership and his chassidus to channel that challenge, to deal with that challenge. So one might argue that the challenge of Western modern America is this idea that I'm the center of the world, and stop bothering me. Leave me alone, I'm fine, leave me alone. If it works for me, I'll take it. And Rebbe came and turned it around and said, you are the center of the world. And not because you need anything, you're like I don't need anything. You are fine, but the rest of the world's waiting for you. Turn the whole thing around. I don't need the whole Yiddishkeit, I'm fine, I'm alone. Who said what you, I'm not talking about what you need or don't need. The whole world's waiting for you. Hashem's purpose of bringing the presence of Hashem to this world is waiting for you. And not because you earned it, don't start thinking, I didn't, I could do it, I can't do it. Not relevant. You were born in the seventh generation, it becomes your job, your mission, your mandate, and you could do it and you have to do it. This is just the beginning of this Maimer. The Maimer gets even more and more and more, again going back and forth between this lofty esoteric level and coming back to the practical.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but before Gimel Thomas, you once spoke about the Rebbe saying that when he was a very young child, he already envisioned.
There's a letter we would ever write that, He wrote that to the President of Israel. He envisioned, even before he went to school, he envisioned what the world will look like when Mashiach comes.
No, but he envisioned what his mission is going to be in the sense of.
It doesn't say that clearly. He said that even as a young child, he envisioned the world of Mashiach's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were a young guy.
So
Tomorrow again?
does anybody want tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, same thing, same time? Tomorrow's Wednesday. Turn off the camera.